Do intro now. Hello and welcome to the Tifo Football Podcast. I'm JJ Bull, here again. Joining me today is Jon Mackenzie. He's returned from...
I need to hold this mug up.
Yes. You can't see that on the podcast, John, because this is
I'm holding
an audio form.
Which has the design from our other studio on it.
I'm also joined by Kaya Kaynak. Oh, he's holding up a bottle of water.
Yeah.
This is a fast-paced start to the podcast. And we're also joined by 1/3 of the data boys. This is what Steve has referred to it as. We've delved deep into the data department of the Athletic newsroom to find him. It's the one and only Thom Harris.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. In our little corner in the office. So we've kind of bagsied that. You get a good overlook of the office.
That's where all the numbers are. That's the bit of the office where all the computers are on the wall.
Yes.
There's huge computers. They all make whirring noises and bits and pieces.
The supercomputers, that's what they have nowadays, isn't it?
That's exactly right.
None of these just common or garden computers.
No
has
abacus.
to be a supercomputer. Yeah.
Oh, is it abacii? Multiple abacuses.
Yeah, I mean, it's an English word, so you can just add the S at the end if you want. It's become an English word, I should say.
From where?
US makes me think it is, I don't know. Yeah, I guess it is Latin. In which case you could tell. I don't know because there's different.
I apologise, JJ. This was a terrible diversion.
Well, let's go into some more diversion. Erling Haaland ate all of Bournemouth's cherries to beat them over the weekend. How Pep Guardiola played rock, paper, scissors to beat Iraola. I was thinking earlier, in a diversion, thinking, I wonder if they came up with rock, paper, scissors, but it is actually perfectly put together, that game. There's not really a flaw in it.
Do you think they should add another one and make it 4?
Dynamite.
Yeah, that would be everything, would it?
Well, Magic Frog.
What would be the hand signal for dynamite?
Magic Frog.
I don't know. What's the difference between haunting someone and creeping up on someone? I give us an answer whilst doing various accents. Does that mean Steve is that? No, it's me is I. I am not Steve. Steve is he. Ow. We then speak about Tottenham's spookily bad problems creating chances in their defeat to Chelsea. I know you're listening to this in November, so Halloween is gone, but it's still in my mind. There's the separation game with some one-stop routes. Thom Harris will impress you. After that, we let John have his say on set pieces. I didn't feel very long at all. I didn't think that. What was it? It must have been quite long
to me
because we got to 12. Well, that's good. And we all agree with him, apart from when he talks about Quidditch. So we talk about that sport and break that down. In fact, the whole part of this intro, if you skip all of the intro, go to the very end of the podcast, you'll find out the real purpose and winner of this podcast related to Quidditch. What isn't an invasion sport, and of course, points are bad, is on hiatus. So we don't do that again. And that is the show. That's what we did this week. Did we do anything else? Is there anything else we missed out on?
It really kind of rattled me on Quidditch because the worst part of the game is the bit before the golden snitch, but like they get battered, don't they? Like there's a lot of violence in that part of the game, and it's
so just people taking hits for nothing.
Yeah. Why would you not want to be the catcher? Is that the word?
Seeker.
I guess it's the same way that I don't understand why you'd want to be front row at rugby.
Fair.
I don't really know. Or a goalkeeper. Be a striker.
The plural of abacus is abacii, or abacus is the standard English plural form, which is used more commonly in everyday language.
Thank you, John. That's the show! Where else to begin than Manchester City 3-1 Bournemouth? Man City ensured Bournemouth's sweet start to the season is beginning to turn bitter.
That doesn't sound like something you'd say, JJ.
No, it's a cherry pun.
Steve's
done it. But he likes the cherries, who are eaten up by Erling Haaland, who scored his 12th and 13th Premier League goals of the campaign already, and looking at the size of him, probably some people on the way. City now sits 6 points behind the early pace setters, Arsenal, who we're going to be talking about later. Lots of conversation about that. Anyway, we're on Man City now. John, this was a fun game for me, but you've noticed ways that Man City were able to cause problems against Bournemouth, who have become this thing that you think might be able to cause Man City problems, but they didn't.
Yeah, Bournemouth having a fun season so far. I think they started out quite strong. Their underlying numbers have fallen away a little bit because they got battered by Palace, essentially, which which has meant that they look maybe not worth their place at the top of the table. But I think if you take that out, then they are actually sort of challenging in the top half. In this game, like I went into this game having seen Pep take Bournemouth apart in the FA Cup knockout stages last season, in a season where City were at their lowest ebb. I think that's how Steve would put it. I don't know any. I can't.
The lowest web, is it a Halloween spider pun?
Web. Nice. I was going to make some kind of moon pun because the City have got like the moon metaphor, but I can't think of one. They waxed and waned a little bit last season or something. I don't know. But yeah, we saw Pep actually take apart Bournemouth's pressing approach last season in that game, and so going into this one, I was like, I'm just convinced that we're not going to see Iraola change too much because he tends to use a sort of roughly one-size-fits-all approach to the out-possession side of the game. That's exactly what we saw. It was a game of two halves, but in the first half, so basically the principle behind what Bournemouth try and do out of possession is they use like a form of hybrid pressing. And what I mean when I say that is that they're going to start out in a zonal structure, covering as much space as possible and giving them good access to be able to jump up at certain moments into a man-to-man press, which is a bit more aggressive, right? So when they get the opponent into a certain area of the pitch where they're happy that they can squeeze them against the touchline and go hard on them, they'll go man-to-man and make it very difficult for these opponents to actually progress the ball. But when they do that, what they usually do is they have a series of jumps in the centre of the pitch, where the 10 will jump up onto the centre-back, and then because the 10's leaving a player behind, one of the 8s will have to follow, and you get this sort of like central jump, and it often leaves space in between the midfield and defensive lines. And if you can access that space and if you can overload that space, you can cause problems for Bournemouth, which is exactly what happened in the game.
What happened last time? Was it the same thing? Because in this one, it looked to me like City were they're playing a lot more combat in the middle. They're trying to leave the sides open, which I wondered because Bournemouth might be weaker at attacking down the wings, but then they've got Semenyo and players like that.
So in the FA Cup game, you'll remember Nico O'Reilly had a really good game because what was happening is that Bournemouth were defending really narrow in order to stop the problems that ensued from. Right. Essentially, what happened is that City moved their wingers inside into the space between the midfield and the defence. And the question is, right, do you track with your fullbacks, go inside and prevent an overload in that way?
Well, specifically like Doku, who's normally stuck on the left touchline, right?
But they did it with both, right? They had Cherki and Doku both coming inside, really narrow, and that opens up channels of space now for your fullbacks. So if you go inside with your fullbacks, what you're essentially saying is we're going to have a foot race between wingers and our wingers, the Bournemouth wingers, and the Man City fullbacks. Or if you leave the fullbacks out wide, you then have the overloads in the middle, and what you end up having to track with one of your centre-backs stepping up, and then that leaves Haaland isolated against one of the centre-backs. Right. And you can find these overloads in the middle, and we saw it for both goals, right? It was just creating those. Actually, the first goal is slightly different, but the second one's a really good example of this.
The first one's the one where Snacy steps up and the
rest defense is horrible.
Man City's up in their Man City's half and catches it out.
Yeah, so essentially the back line, I think Tavernier plays the ball into the box, and Bournemouth just aren't prepared defensively for just an immediate turnover, and it means that the Bournemouth defense is super deep. Haaland has dropped off, so Diakite realizes I'm going to have to step up.
He's tight with Haaland.
Yeah. And so that opens up the space between the fullback and the centre back. And you can see that through the first half, they're constantly creating that space by having the centre back push up. And one of the City players is always looking for that seam between the players that are.
Do you think in the coaching during that week that Guardiola would have done your small sided stuff to try and he knows that Bournemouth press would do that, and so the sessions would have been based on creating that same situation?
I think that what they would have worked on in training is trigger the press. This is how you trigger their press. And the reason why that becomes so dangerous is it's something that you control. So you can be like, if we do these certain things, we know they're going to jump their midfield up. They're going to open out that space. Then have your wingers finding that space. And then because of one of the centre-backs jumping up, then find Haaland in space behind. So that's what they'll have worked. And a lot of it's to do with timing, right? It's about getting everything in the right order. In the first half, they were just killing them through the middle over and over and over by doing this, like bait the press, find the space, hit Haaland isolated in behind. In the second half, they then started they switched it so the fullbacks started coming inside a lot more, and it made the game a lot more even. But then the third goal comes from Nico O'Reilly having acres of space because now Bournemouth are having to try and overload the centre, and then there's confusion about who needs to step up onto him. No one does it. He gets into the box and then scores from there. So it's very much a this is the weakness of Iraola's press. If you can do this, you're going to cause problems either way. Whatever they choose to do with the fullbacks, the weakness is going to open up. And I guess in the modern game, like, teams are just much happier for weaknesses to exist in the wide areas now because it's just much harder to score from them. But that's a great example of why, right? This is why you're seeing Chelsea with their fullbacks jumping up like 60 meters onto the other fullback rather than just having one of their midfielders do it. Because if you can build through the middle now, you get the first half that City had where they put up like 1.5 XG just by finding space and pinging it over the top. So yeah, modern football is going that way where you've got to just try and make it as hard as possible for the weaknesses to exist through the middle and just be like, fine, we'll let it exist on the outside.
Well, another thing that happened is in having all those players bunched together in the middle, it meant you could get Cherki and Foden together, which means they get more fun out of them.
Absolutely. I mean, it was the first time they started together for City. Obviously, Cherki's
right?
had a few injury issues and things like that, but it was really nice to see them both because there was a lot of freedom and a lot more space, I think, than usual because of the way that Bournemouth played. But I think it's interesting because Foden, obviously, he scored 19 goals 2 seasons ago. I don't think he's yet to score in the Premier League this season. I might be wrong about that. But Pep is clearly placing a lot of trust in him. He's basically played all of the last 5 games in the Premier League, full 90 minutes. He came off a bit early yesterday against Bournemouth. But I think it's to do with this ability that Pep kind of says he has in the small spaces. Pep talks about it a lot. He talks about it with Rico Lewis as well.
Yeah.
But he says that Foden, he's one of the best players they have in the small spaces in the final third. And that the next action is always very aggressive from him. You know, he can receive the ball in tight spaces, but then make a very kind of, darting run or a nice pass through kind of into the box. And that was evident in the second goal, I think. He drifts into the space between the lines in the build-up. And when you're watching it from a TV, it kind of doesn't look like the pass is on, but Foden is demanding it from Ruben Diaz, gets the ball and flicks it round to Cherki, who then plays it through to Haaland. And it's all to do with that kind of dragging Senesi out of our position, as you mentioned, John. So yeah, he's not scoring as much, but I think he's so
apparently he has won this season. Just one.
Who's that against? I can't remember. Oh, United, of course. When he kind of
the header, very unlike him as well.
Yeah, exactly.
I think it's interesting you mentioned that as well because like Foden is being used in a deeper position in the game at the weekend, and I think that is a reflection of where the small spaces have now moved to. So I think what we're talking about there is like baiting presses up and then finding the space in behind the press, and I think it's interesting that City can now use Cherki in the spaces and they're using Foden almost in the position before the spaces arrive because he can receive the ball and then find the gaps through and like you said, the darting runs. If you can, there was so many times in that game where he was receiving under pressure and able to sort of break through into the space with ball carrying, which is very different to the role that he played in the treble winning season. Where was it the season after where he scored a ton of goals, where he was just much more like a second striker, almost like I don't know. It's almost like the way that Arda Güler has been used now, where he's been used slightly deeper. And I think that's what we're seeing. The tactical meta is shifting so that, the small spaces are now no longer in the final third. They're now deeper in the field. But if you can use them well and get the ball through those that oppositions like high pressure, you can then find a lot of joy in those like mini transition.
I was thinking this as well. And the thing is, like, oftentimes you get the wide players now, they just tend to get the ball, move a little bit up, and then go backwards with it, not what wingers I want them to do, really. And Güler, I thought I said this to you before, I think when I watched play for Turkey especially, he's better in that midfield kind of position. Cherki I think is really interesting because he seems like a very typical Man City floating 8, that kind of player. But if you get him next to people, that I thought he was so much better in this game than I've seen him play in other games for City. And I think maybe it's because there were so many people around him that the combinations he could have.
I think so, yeah. I think it'll be really interesting to see what Pep does next time City face a team who will sit in deep and who will kind of provide them with a low block. Does he play Foden and Cherki again? Because Cherki's so good at the kind of, I think aesthetically to watch, he's very impressive, but he's really good at kind of changing the rhythm of a game, I think. He kind of reminds me a bit of Lamine Yamal when he has the ball at his feet in terms of being able to do things really unexpectedly, really quickly. He doesn't really have to adjust his body position to kind of play a quick kind of pass with the outside of his boot or kind of change the angle like really quickly. And that just makes him so unpredictable. And yeah, really good in a game like this, as you say, JJ, because there are players around him and he can wriggle away. But interesting to see, how that plays out against when he's against set defenses. Is that going to work? Is that going to be something where it's going to become a little bit frustrating? He's going to lose the ball and get countered. I think I think the next game will be really interesting to see if that kind of the two of them together, whether it was just because Pep anticipated they'd have a bit more space, or whether this is something he sees as a bit more of a solution going forward.
One player that probably will play in the next game is Erling Haaland. HLTCO on Twitter pointed out that Haaland has 98 goals in 107 Premier League games, which...
It's a lot of goals.
Yes.
Yeah.
Have you seen a better striker than Haaland?
Oh, gosh. I don't think... I don't think I've ever seen anyone where it's been so sort of almost predetermined, where every time they run through on goal, you're like, oh, yeah, this is done.
That is maybe the feeling. I was talking about this yesterday with people. I was thinking, when he runs through, it feels inevitable. But do you think it is because he's just like on form, or because there's something extra special about him?
I think it's because it's him. I feel like, especially the second goal where he takes it round Petrovic, and it's actually quite a hard finish from the angle, and the defender, I think it's Diakite, is coming back and can slide in, so like blocks off quite a large portion of the goal. So there's only a tiny bit of the goal where you can get it in. That level of composure and that level of like accuracy in front of the goal is something that he seems to have, and he always seems to be able to. He has excellent strength, so he can kind of stay on balance all the time. He's never like off balance when he's taking shots, really, and yeah, he's
hits him with power as well. It was like conviction shots.
Yeah. He means it for sure.
Then he probably needs the space to run into, which I guess Bournemouth probably gave him.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's really interesting with Haaland because it's one of those, like, if he doesn't score, you're very quickly to notice that he's not scored and that he's not done anything. I remember there was a period last season, it was the Arsenal game where City lost it 5-1. He wasn't really doing anything off the ball. He wasn't really making many kind of interesting runs. He wasn't like, every time City had the ball and it was kind of going into the box, he was drifting to the far post. It was all very predictable. But I think now with City, I think Pep's kind of led this kind of a bit of a rebuild in terms of introducing a lot more kind of athleticism and physicality, and City can play now a little bit more transitionally. I think Gonzalez is a good example of this kind of player now where, there's this kind of control that he has with the ball at his feet, but he's also very good if the game opens up in kind of getting from box to box. And I think with Marmoush as well, making runs off him, we've not seen that very much this season, but I think that's another thing that can kind of unlock Haaland because it creates spaces for him to dart into.
I was going to ask, do you think Haaland's doing anything different this season or over the last little while, or whether it's Man City players generally are doing things different for him?
I think they're looking for him a lot more. I've not looked into the numbers, but we have really good data from Skill Corner who kind of look at off-the-ball movement and how often teams look to play Haaland in. And I'd be interested to see if the kind of percentage has gone up, because the goal that sticks out to me is the Brentford goal, where that pass, Haaland makes the run. He kind of had a battle with Vandenberg. He said in the
he likes it.
That he likes it, and I think that's a kind of pass that wouldn't have been played into him previously because it was a kind of a bit of a.
Was it Guardiola?
It was Guardiola kind of curled it around exactly.
Back line, yeah.
And it's a kind of pass that Guardiola it doesn't really want to rely on a one-on-one. I don't think.
Do you remember the early match of the day footages of Haaland when he was playing at City, like when he first arrived, and it felt like every match of the day was like, here's a run they could have found for Haaland if he'd have made it. And it was constantly being like, why don't they just play him in behind? And I think a lot of it came down to the fact that stylistically, City was still playing in that way where they wanted to dominate possession, they wanted to control games, they wanted to force opponents into low blocks, so they wanted to play fewer risky passes. They were much more risk averse. And I think what we're seeing now is that City are just much less risk averse because to an extent that dominant paradigm has collapsed a little bit. And as a result, they're like, well, wait a minute, we've got one of the best in behind runners in a number 9 shirt. Does he wear number 9?
Yeah. Yes, yeah.
Yeah, well, that's worked out quite nicely. I was expecting a message from Steve being like, actually, Haaland wears the number 11. I think when you've got that and suddenly you're able to start playing in these ways, that there's no surprise to me that City are suddenly so reliant on Haaland all of a sudden.
But what if you just put 2 players in Haaland or something like that? If you take Haaland out of it, how many goals is it? He scored basically all their goals, right?
13
yeah.
Premier League.
So
Premier League goals.
I don't know if there's a way to stop him because he's a large boy. It's hard to do it, and he seems to get in. But if you stop him, then don't they just stop scoring?
I listened to the pre-match press conference from Andoni Iraola, and he was asked about this. They were basically saying if you stop Haaland from scoring, there's a good chance you're taking points off City. And Iraola was just kind of like, yeah, but you can't just have one plan for like one thing, because if you have 3 players on Haaland, then they'll obviously take you apart somewhere else. But in hindsight, looking back on it, it's kind of like you did allow Haaland to be like isolated 1v1 against the centre back a lot, and it did cause a lot of problems. So I don't know, maybe you should have just focused on stopping Haaland from scoring, and you might have come out with a bit more joy in this game.
Kaya, do you think we will see more teams do to Bournemouth what City just did? Have they found a way to pull apart his press? And
I don't know, because I think Pep Guardiola is very good, and John was saying this before, Pep's very good at finding weaknesses if a team plays the same way every single time. But I think the fact that Bournemouth are kind of a team that play a bit of an outlier of the way that other teams play, I think that kind of is a superpower for them, and I think they'll pick up points against teams who you'd expect them to beat. But I suppose managers like Pep will find that weakness if you keep playing the same way over and over again. And yeah, so I don't think it's a massive disaster for Bournemouth. Also, they've had big players out injured for portions of this season. Like Evan Nilsson's been out, Krupi's come in. They've had key players missing, and they still are. I think are they still second or are they third now?
They're
Fourth.
Yeah.
Oof, bad weekend for them. But they're still
on goal difference. They dropped below Liverpool, I think.
Okay, where are they in the expected points still?
for Bournemouth,
Their expected points.
I just looked at it. They're quite low down.
Yeah,
now.
they're not.
Really?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11th.
God, maybe everything I said was wrong.
Well, I think they've had just a couple of games, like I mentioned, the Palace one, is a big one in the in the data where I think it's sort of positive.
But I think they'll be fun for the rest of the season, and it'd be great to see them in Europe next year if they can sustain a challenge for the European places. I think last season they probably would have done if it weren't for injuries that they picked up, and this season if they can try and stay a bit healthier, then a European challenge is definitely, I think, on the cards for them.
And lastly on this, John, are City still vulnerable?
Yeah, I mean they are. And I think a lot of this comes down to the fact that we mentioned it before, but like they used to be able to play in a roughly one size fits all approach where Guardiola was able to almost force teams to play on his games and on his terms.
Yeah, it seems different from game to game sometimes now.
Yes, they feel much more flexible. And I think a lot of that is to do with the fact that, the meta now is just like, you've got to be tactically flexible. So we even like in the last two games, you see City in this game, like mid-blocking a lot of the time, not bothering to press high, actually taking in the end less possession than Bournemouth at home, which is just completely unexpected. But then the week before against Villa, being quite happy to press high up against Villa, who are trying to build up from the back. And I think that's what we're seeing from Guardiola now. He's much happier to sort of diversify the way that they're playing. The way that I've explained it to some people in the last few weeks is in terms of like rock, paper, scissors, the game. So it felt like in the past that Guardiola was like playing rock football, but could basically force everyone to always play scissors. And so it meant that they were
a hypnotist.
Yeah. Some. I don't know how the metaphor kind of works in that respect, but now what we've seen is that teams are able to like play paper football now, and so as a result, Guardiola can't just rely on being rock football. He has to sometimes play scissors football himself.
I feel like the elite paid as much as they should be able to realize when people are going to play rock every single time.
yeah, but I think that, so I guess the way that I would explain it is that he was because they were playing a form of positional play against largely zonal defences, they were basically able to do two things. One was either just play through your zonal defence with no problems because pockets of space open up, and similar to what we saw happening with Bournemouth. Then if you start going man to man, which is what happens in the second half of that game, it becomes a little bit of a different question. But
Haaland's like the scissors poking through the paper.
yeah, exactly. And I think the other thing that they could do is if teams didn't want to give up all of that space in a zonal system, they would just drop deeper to make the spaces more compact. And so you can force them into a low block, and then you just optimize your team to break down that low block. And that was what was happening in enough games for them to win, 7 out of 10 games every season. You win the league or challenge for the title every season if you can do that. And now teams are refusing to allow themselves to just be pinned back, and it's changing the way that football is. And so I think what we're seeing now from Guardiola is like the realization, I can't just play rock football all the time. I'm going to have to develop paper and scissors football too. And as soon as you do that, you can't really optimize for one. And it means that you're not going to be as dominant, I think. But it's been really interesting seeing how much City have changed. So even like the Arsenal game as well, where they ended up actually playing low block football. And I think all of the City players and Pep afterwards have said, we didn't want to play in that way, but that they were forced to play in that way. And yeah, we've just seen so many different styles and approaches. The Brighton game where they tried to be really aggressive pressing just because it felt as though they were like, well, we're getting killed in transition. So if we make our press even more aggressive, then maybe we won't get killed in transition. But then moving to the game like yesterday, where they're like, okay, we're just going to sit in a block a lot more and hopefully stop Bournemouth from being able to cause us any problems. Just feels like he's being more pragmatic than even he was before.
Speaking of blocks, maybe Tottenham 0, Chelsea 1.
Blockingham,
Blockspur. Blockingham, Blockspur remain above Chelsea, who are 5th in the Premier League, despite losing to their fellow Londoners 1-0 at the Blockingham Blockspur Stadium. Boos rang out around the stands because it was Halloween. Spooky people in the stands from the Tottenham faithful and on the pitch. Thomas Frank was blanked by at least one of his players at the final whistle. I'm sure we'll talk about that in a second.
Why are ghosts associated with the word boo? Because I don't know, like, there's a difference between haunting someone, right, and then just like creeping up on them and jumping out on them.
Yeah. I haven't ever thought of that, and I'm surprised I hadn't thought of that because it's the kind of thing I would think of. Okay, maybe
do you think of
like,
ghosts? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
I can
that's
think
what
of,
I thought.
But like boo is like, if a ghost said boo to me, I don't know.
Yeah.
I would be surprised on a number of levels, I suppose. But
I don't think ghosts ever actually say anything either, because like normally they're just an old Victorian man or a lady whose head's fallen off.
What's your favourite ghost?
Have
you got a favourite?
I don't know. Like my uncle, who isn't my uncle, his sister, who isn't at all related to me at all, because he's not really my uncle.
Is he related to you at all?
No, he's my dad's best friend.
Okay.
But she used to own a hotel in York, and everywhere in York is haunted.
Yeah.
You've been to York before?
I went to university in York.
Did you?
Yeah.
Was the university haunted?
Were
University was haunted
you
as hell.
haunted by things?
Yeah. As people just come up saying boo behind me all the time. It was terrifying.
That's good. But so all the different hotel owners, what do you call them? Hoteliers?
Yeah, hoteliers.
Yes.
Or you can say it in the French way, it sounds even better.
Hotelier. So, where is the ghost? There would be poltergeist. Apparently there's loads of them
That's a
everywhere.
German word. Actually.
It sounds like it would
Yeah.
be, yeah. But they would all the different people in hotels would say that, oh yeah, we go to bed, but then this book I put over here was suddenly over here and the table's moving. They all had stories about that. I think poltergeists are quite good. They're quite linked to lots of...
It's trolls, aren't they? They're like unalive trolls.
Well, I was thinking, what if those are like teenagers, just who we can't see, who are just doing tricks to wind up people?
Yeah, I mean, if you could influence the world in that way after life, you would do it, wouldn't you?
If you
Surely
could haunt
that's the
someone,
best.
if you were given the choice,
Yeah.
would you haunt someone?
I wouldn't scare someone. I would just be like, I would just mess with them,
Well,
get them to second guess themselves.
yeah, I think that's a good way.
It's funny because that mug wasn't on the table at the start of this show, was
It's
it?
true.
Yeah.
It was over there.
Yeah.
Well, apart from the ghosts in the crowd, it felt surprising seeing this discontent for a second, because they were booing them, the fans, and they finished 17th in the league last season, but this year they're like they're 5th, aren't they? Mm-hmm. So like that's a lot better than what they were doing last season. So it's odd that they're getting booed. Why are they being booed, Tom?
Yeah, I think, I mean, it's the second time I can remember this season that they've been absolutely battered at home, Bournemouth and Chelsea. And I think both teams came with like quite an intense kind of well-structured pressing plan. Ahmed Walid of The Athletics wrote a really good piece this morning on what Chelsea did well and how they pressed against them. And yeah, I think it 0.05 expected goals, which is not,
total, not even just
it's not great. So I think that's part of the reason why. And you kind of, we spoke a lot about this on other podcasts and this podcast as well, but they do have issues progressing the ball up the pitch. I think that midfield three, it's not massively inspiring, is it? I think when you go to a game at home and it's Bentancur, Palhinha and Sarr, who I think, Sarr is quite good. I think he is in terms of, against City, I remember he was making a lot of runs in behind and looked really impressive. But when you are feeding the ball into Palhinha and Bentancur, it's not going forward with that kind of zip that you need it to really to get through the press. And I think Chelsea did quite well to direct them down kind of blind alleys, especially from goal kicks, because they love looking for Kudus. I think that is the kind of the out ball for them, because he's the one player really who I think is really good with his back to goal.
His first touch is so good.
Really,
even when he's got 3 players on him for a hit, like for an aerial ball.
Exactly. So, you can kind of tempt them into playing that ball. And I think it was a João Pedro chance in the first half, which he missed, actually came from that, where they forced it down to Porro. The ball on was the ball down to Kudus, which he always play. They blocked that ball and then it kind of runs through to Pedro and they nearly score from it. So I think it is just a little bit predictable, a little bit uninspiring on the ball. And that's probably why the reaction went as it did.
It doesn't look that fun being a Spurs player just now.
No.
Certain players aren't performing very well.
Yeah, I think someone who looks particularly not fun for is Xavi Simons at the minute. He was brought in as this creative hope to solve a lot of the issues that Tom outlined there in terms of Paulinho and Bentancur is it's a stodgy midfield. That's a beige buffet of a midfield. That's your chicken nuggets, jalapeno poppers, like stick it in the air fryer, that kind of vibe, which is fine. It's tasty, but it's not really getting
often
you
an
like
orange
the balance.
plate is nice.
Yeah.
Broken the cardinal rule of lunchtime podcasting.
Are you hungry now?
Yeah, I'm starving.
Yeah, sorry about that. You're ready for a beige buffet for lunch?
I would murder a beige buffet.
We can do a beige
right
buffet
now.
for lunch. That can be arranged. But but a nice balanced meal is what you probably need in midfield. And Spurs aren't really getting it at the minute because, like Tom was saying, Bentancur and Paulinho are struggling to progress the ball up with the sort of the speed that you would need. And Xavi Simons, Kudus is very good at receiving the ball with his back to play and has the strength, whereas Simons maybe not as strong in that area. And it seems like he's kind of not really sure of what his role is. And it does feel like Thomas Frank is kind of figuring out what to do with him as well, because sometimes he's been played really centrally and hasn't been given the freedom to kind of go around the pitch and do various different things. I think he came on the left wing because Lucas Bergwall was the original plan, and that changed. And he didn't. I mean, he had some moments where you sort of he's able to get away from players, and there were some nice little dribbles in the way he progressed the ball quickly via dribbling, and you sort of think, oh, okay, this is what all the hype was about with Xavi Simons. But it feels like maybe he's not quite used to the pace of the Premier League yet, and you get that extra little split second in the
Strikes me as a
Bundesliga.
player that would be very good in Spain, but is adapting.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe that's sort of unfair because there's a lot of burden on him with Spurs because Kulusevski is out, because Maddison is out.
Well, do you think that they'd make a difference if they were in the team?
I think they'd allow some of the burden to be off Simons in the sense that people would be looking elsewhere. They would be giving Simons a bit more time to bed in. And Kulusevski in particular, I think, is a player who's really good at progressing the ball and probably would, you assume, be playing in one of those positions that Spurs, I mean, maybe instead of Simons in the 10 position, but he might be able to come a bit deeper and help progress the ball in the way that Bentancur and Paulinho can't. And I think Maddison was a big part of Frank's plans in pre-season before he got his ACL. So I think they would help. I don't know if they'd be able to solve the issues entirely because I think a lot of it comes from Thomas Frank's pragmatism, and there's not much room for manoeuvre within it. There's a lot of horseshoe of death, as you were describing the other day, or was it donut of sadness?
It's not of death, no. It's of sadness.
Donut of sadness. It's horseshoe of sadness.
It's more extreme if it causes that, yes.
Okay.
I think
there's a lot of that with the way Spurs play, and there's not much. I think Kolo Muani had 14 touches over the Chelsea game, which is not enough really for a centre forward, and not enough that Spurs will want. Maybe if they have players like Dom Solanke back in the team who can hold the ball up and deal with it with their back to play a bit more, that might help them. But I think right now the issue is there's not enough movement in midfield. There's not enough sort of versatility, and they're quite, as I said at the start, it's quite stodgy, and that's an issue. If you're a fan, it's not fun to watch.
Well, one thing that everyone is aligned on is that Thomas Frank has improved Spurs defensively, John.
Yeah, this is funny, I think, because I was just looking through the numbers now. There's only been 4 games so far this season where Spurs have conceded less than an expected goal. Which is maybe just an arbitrary cutoff, but those games came against Burnley, West Ham, Villarreal in the Champions League, where they actually drew on expected goals, right? So it was 0.5 expected goals each, and then in the Villa game, where Villa ended up winning that game anyway. And the rest of the time, if you look at it, like some of those numbers are kind of hefty. Even the games where it's just crept over 1 expected goal against, was the Wolves draw 1-1. You know, the games where they're actually defending well, a lot of them are coming against teams where you're like, well, they're not particularly great attacking teams.
Also, at like good points of the season where like West Ham were terrible at exactly the time they played them.
Yeah, exactly. And there's been some, like they conceded over 2 expected goals against Bodo Glimt in the Champions League,
right.
Over 2 goals against Monaco in the Champions League, over 2 goals against Chelsea this weekend. So like they are conceding big numbers. And I think, I don't know, that one of the things that I always find interesting about, I think that Thomas Frank has this reputation for being a good defensive coach because he's quite conservative as a coach in many respects.
They feel more solid, but that is maybe because of the juxtaposition between what was there before.
Yeah, and I think it all falls back on itself, right? And that's the thing maybe frustrates me is that a lot of people will say, well, what you do is you sort out your defense and then you can start worrying about your attack. But so much of what you do when you're attacking influences the way that you're defending and vice versa, right? So if you are going to, for example, if you are going to possess the ball a lot, you're going to do less defending, right? So in many respects, if you're a team like Spurs who have the ability to be able to, or the players to be able to keep the ball more, it almost makes sense to be like, well, one way of like mitigating defensiveness is to just have, 55-60% of the ball. The way the game is going is maybe away from that kind of control, but they definitely could have ways of keeping the ball which make it easier for them to defend, I would say. But also like the way that you're trying to possess the ball. Like if you're, again, with City in the past, it was all about moving the ball away from your goal and possessing it high up the pitch. There are ways of being able to influence the defensive problems that you're facing. That said, I also think that there are issues with the way that Thomas Frank teams defend. So I think people talk about Frank being quite tactically flexible because in some games he'll press high, some games he'll mid block, some games he'll low block. But in the games where they press high, I think often the high press isn't as good as people say that it is. And when they're high pressing, they often drop quite quickly from that high press into a low block. When they low block, I think they often get too compact. So you'll see the midfielders drop into the back line and then space opens out on the edge. So there was the Joao Pedro chance in the first half where Chelsea get to the byline and they can just play it back to the edge, well, basically to the edge of the 6-yard box because the Spurs back line drops in so compact that space opens out and the attacking players don't get back quick enough. Issues like that will become terminal when opponents realise that that's where those weaknesses are and where they exist. And I think we're starting to see now teams targeting those kind of weaknesses in the high press, weaknesses in the low block. I think they are good in a mid block phase generally. But yeah, I think that reputation exists mainly because he was at Brentford, where they do have to spend a lot of time playing defensive football.
Yeah, he's got different players now as well.
Yeah, I think that when you arrive at a team like Spurs, you can't just defend in that way, right? You can't just play like Brentford at Spurs. There is an expectation that you are generating more with your attackers. And if you're going to do that, then you have to cater your defensive approach to fit with what you need to do from an attacking point of view. And right now, it doesn't feel as though Frank has got that balance quite right.
Well, Chelsea seemed to get their balance right and largely dominated Spurs in that game. And one of the players that really stood out, especially in the goal, was Moises Caicedo. However, Enzo Fernández was another fellow expensive signing. And I believe you have noticed, Tom, that he's evolved his role during his time at Chelsea.
Yeah, I mean, I think he was really good on the weekend. I think he kind of started off when he signed for Chelsea as a bit more of a kind of sitting midfielder. He was one of those players who you want him deep, you want him getting on the ball as much as possible, getting into the rhythm of the game, kind of dictating things. But I think looking now, even if looking at the numbers, the number of kind of touches and passes have plummeted the last 2 seasons since Enzo Maresca's comes in. So I think that suggests that he's playing a little bit further up and he's not being that dictating kind of presence. That's more Caicedo. I think Caicedo is a player now who's picking up the ball from the midfield, from the defence and driving forward. I think he's kind of underrated a little bit, Fernandes, in terms of
Chris, a lot of chances, I've noticed.
Yeah, he does. And he does really well at kind of timing his runs into the box. So he didn't really have a clear-cut chance against Tottenham, I don't think, but there were a few moments where he kind of slips off to the back post, and if the ball in was better or played earlier, he would have had a clear chance. He scored a few goals this season. There was one against Brighton which really sticks out, where Joao Pedro drops into midfield, lays it back off, and then straight away he's identified that space and he's attacking it and timing the run well. And then I think it's Reece James with the ball and he heads it home. But yeah, I think he was really good. He's not kind of, he's not got the pace really. He's not kind of the kind of transitional player who's going to dominate. When he gets the ball, he's not going to kind of streak away and score on his own. But I think when you can kind of, as Chelsea did, identify these weaknesses and build up nicely against Spurs as he did, he was kind of drifting over to the left, linking up play really nicely, but then also attacking the space really well as well. So yeah, I think his role has evolved. And I think it's really interesting with Chelsea with Caicedo, who is such a good player. I mean, we've spoken about him. He's just absolutely brilliant, and his role in that goal was just. He can't really he kind of just times every tackle so well, and he just kind of gets there with his legs every single time. It's almost like he's just reaching balls that he shouldn't be able to. It's a nicely balanced midfield, and I think it is coming together quite well, despite with Maresca. I think there's a lot of scrutiny on him, and he's kind of taken one step forward and one step back. But I think overall the general trend is pointing towards a team who are looking a lot more comfortable with what he's trying to do.
And that brings us on nicely, I think, to the separation game.
Okay, JJ, you want to play as is your want this time as well?
I would like to play.
Okie dokie. So, all four of you shall be playing. This episode, your journey shall be Ricardo Quaresma to Luis Suarez. And of course, as the audience will remember, but Tom, this may not be the first time you heard this, we have a via rule now. So you have to go via a player. Via former Republic of Ireland defender, Phil Babb. And I will tell you, it is possible to do this using just one connection.
Ooh.
I won't tell you which side, but it is possible with just one. So it's Ricardo Quaresma to Luis Suarez via Phil Babb. So JJ may have a break, please.
And we'll be back with the answers after this break. We are back in the room for the separation game. Steve's going to tell us what's happening, aren't you?
I am indeed. So, to go around the room, how many connections do we think we've got it by? Starting with you, Kaya.
I'm definitely not
He hasn't got it.
in the game. I've got it. I have it in 1, 2, 3, 4, 4.
4 for Kaya. Okay, John.
No,
Is that did not qualify?
I don't know.
Oh, you're a bit disconsolate about the via route, aren't you, John? You're saying
Yeah, and as soon as you said there's one person, I just looked for the one person and didn't find it. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay.
Similar for me.
So are you just not?
I mean, I think you can get from Ricardo Quaresma to Phil Babb via Luis Garcia somehow.
But how many, as a guess, how many do you, as a rough number, or do you just not want to?
You'd need someone else because they weren't there at the same time.
Are you taking your ball home essentially for this game?
I'm taking, yeah.
Okay. Okay. JJ.
I think I got the one.
Okay.
But interesting that John just said that, so now I'm doubting that I've managed to do.
Well,
Is it Luis Garcia?
No.
Let's see. And Tom, how about you?
Yeah, either this is beginner's luck or I've got the rules wrong, but I think I've also got the one as well.
Yeah.
But I have checked, and I think
You've got it?
I've got a lineup here, which I'm going to reference in my.
Excellent.
We'll
Okay,
see.
Kaya, let's start with you first then.
Oh, man, I want to... okay.
No, you've
Fine.
had your time.
Yeah, fine. That's fair. Ricardo Quaresma, he actually played at Sporting Lisbon, or Sporting Club de Portugal with Phil Babb, but I went Hugo Viana in between them just for fun. And then Phil Babb played at Liverpool with Jamie Carragher, who played with Ryan Babel. And I looked this up, there was a 3-day gap in between when Ryan Babel left Liverpool and when Luis Suarez arrived at Liverpool, which was really soul destroying. So I chucked in Martin Skirtle in there just for fun.
So you've refined it by 1 on the fly. So you said 4 a second ago, but it sounds like you did then find a 3 or...
Wait, is that not 4?
No, you went Viana.
You added Viana in.
Viana. Yeah, well, you can't do the fact that Quaresma played with Babb, right? There has to be someone.
No,
in
you
between.
can.
Oh, all right, yeah.
So you got 3. There we
cool,
go.
Great,
Better
yeah,
you
cool.
4.
Yeah.
Good. Okay, JJ, you're 1.
Well, Phil Babb played at Sporting with Quaresma.
Mm-hmm.
And then Phil Babb played at Sunderland. Is that the same one you've got?
No.
With Stuart Downing?
Yes.
Yeah.
Stuart
You played with
Downing.
Luis Suarez at
Oh.
Liverpool.
Okay, and that is the route that I devised as well.
Yeah.
So we're potentially saying that there's another one route that Tom Harris has.
Hopefully. Yeah.
If you're listening to this, Tom looks scared.
Well, I've got, Babb and Quaresma. I've actually got, they beat Varzim 4-0 on the 8th of December 2001. Quaresma scored and Phil Babb started in at centre-back. And then I just went Babb to Carragher and then Carragher to Suarez.
Oh,
Yeah.
that works also.
That
Yeah.
also works.
Yeah.
Okay.
Why did I put hang on, I had Carragher. Why did I put 3 players in between?
That's why I was scared.
Why did I do that?
Spirit of the game.
Yes.
Yeah. I technically got the 1 as well then.
True.
I just didn't realise even though it was right in front of me.
So we were discussing in the break as well. Do we feel like my saying you can do it in 1 is more confusing or less, or more fun,
More
less
confusing.
fun? More
Less
confusing,
fun.
John. Okay. You literally just quit, didn't you? So
I think we should stop playing this game altogether.
Well, there we go. I personally enjoyed that very much, John. I don't know about you. But anyway, that was this week's separation game. Well done. JJ and Tom, joint winners, I think.
Definitely not Kaya, though. He definitely didn't win.
I can suggest another 1 if you want. I mean, Steven Gerrard would also count.
Oh, yeah.
But I'm just going to bury my head in shame. Yeah.
There we go.
Don't think you can bury yourself in shame.
Bury your head in shame.
Yeah, I don't know if
young
you can
man.
do that. Yeah.
Well, I think moving on to how one should or could play a game, how one does, I think suits us quite nicely for our next topic, doesn't it, JJ?
Yeah, Steve's. Do you want to keep going?
No, you go.
Okay. Arsenal, Manchester United, Bournemouth, they scored from corners this weekend. Crystal Palace scored from throw-ins, I think. There's lots of things been happening. Lots of Premier League sides leaning into using dead ball situations to bring games of football to life. It's written here. I don't think it feels like it brings them to life. There's lots of goals from set pieces, lots of shots from set pieces. And Jon Mackenzie has thoughts about this. And
I feel like I'm being thrown under the bus.
Well, I would like to talk about this with you because I think it's interesting because it just feels like everyone is relying on set pieces now. And it almost to the point it might be becoming an issue, maybe, for the sport.
Yeah, I was off last week, so I did some tweets about set pieces. And someone said I was lower than scum for suggesting that set pieces might be overpowered.
I'm sorry I was angry that day.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, right? Because on the one hand, the Premier League clearly considers there to be an issue with set pieces because at the beginning of every season at the moment, they're trying to find ways of changing the rules to try and stop set pieces from becoming so overpowered. A lot of Arsenal fans are very miffed at me for bringing this up because this is happening at a point in time when Arsenal are very good at set pieces and they've scored 10 set pieces in 10 games. So, they are as efficient they're almost as efficient as Erling Haaland at this point, just from set pieces alone. But the concern for me, I guess, came from the fact that a lot of teams are now doing this. So not only are Arsenal up there, Chelsea are up there as well. I think they've maybe got 8 set piece goals from 10 games now. And this is Chelsea, right? This is a team who are not built for set piece success necessarily.
How are you built for set piece success?
Well, I think, I guess to go back to what we've been talking about with respect to the meta shifting, it feels like the Premier League has moved to much more of a physical sort of quality of player because transition defending is becoming so much harder to do. And so a lot of teams are moving towards making their teams harder to break down in transition. And by doing that, you actually get the benefit of actually in potentially becoming better at attacking set pieces because the more physically dominant you are, the more you're going to benefit from that. So that's sort of the background. But Chelsea doing it. Spurs scored 2 set pieces against Everton and ended up winning that game off the back of that. And this is a Spurs team that we've just talked about, that they are struggling to score goals right now. And so in that respect, it felt as though that game they won just off the back of the fact that they could do this sort of like roundabout way of generating goals and winning. Manchester United scored both of their goals at the weekend from set pieces in that 2-2 draw with Forest. For me, that just sort of raises some questions because I think in the past we've always considered set pieces to be a sort of bonus element for teams at the bottom of the table to find ways of scoring. And what we're starting to see now is that teams at the top of the table are realizing, there's actually a lot of joy to be had from targeting.
Doesn't that make sense though? Because I think for a long time it's been sort of universally agreed. Maybe you'll have numbers, Tom, but like 30%.
Give us some numbers, Tom.
Yeah. I'm not saying you have to have them, but like I remember we did a video on the old Tifo IRL. I think was it me or was it us? I can't remember. Is it better to have a set piece coach or like one £50 million striker because the set piece coach is going to guarantee you lots of goals if you get it right? So it makes sense if you're trying to maximize every single little bit. It makes sense to focus on that and even focus part of your training sessions just on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And my criticism here isn't that teams aren't, optimizing ways of winning games within the rules of the games, right? That's obviously what that's a good thing. I think that this is a good thing. I
feel bad. I've got Tom looking for numbers. You don't have to do that. Sorry.
So there's been a lot of pushback against people complaining about Arsenal because I think in the past, teams like Manchester City and Liverpool have been praised for their ability to score goals from set pieces during their dominant periods. But I think the context here is that what Arsenal are doing is like completely different levels to what have happened before. So we're talking about like before the weekend, I think Arsenal were like 66% of their goals were from 66% of their goals had come from set pieces, which is obviously very high. Whereas in these periods in time when City and Liverpool have been very good at them, it's been closer to 20% of their goals coming in that way. And I suppose this then just sort of boils down to what you think the game is about. Do you think that the game is essentially like an invasion sport where you're trying to break down an opponent and get the ball into their goal, and that is the main part of it? Or whether you think that the set piece is an integral part of that, and it's a good way of being able to break down a low block, which is what all Arsenal fans tell me, and whether or not therefore that almost justifies you being able to lean into it. But I think where I would push back on this is that in the past, teams have always treated set pieces as like an extension of their tactical approach. So with City, it was like lots of short corners, getting the ball back into play, recycling, and doing the thing they're optimized for. When Liverpool were doing it, they were doing it in a much more sort of like get the ball into the box. It was a lot more kind of counter-pressy, heavy metal style of set pieces. Whereas it almost feels with Arsenal now that they've gone the other way, and their set piece approach is like informing their in possession play. So they're able to play super defensive football, risk-averse football, because they know that they won't give away many goals. But the way that they're very good at progressing the ball in a way where they aren't going to lose the ball. They get the ball into dangerous areas where they're more likely to win set pieces. And as a result of this, they can play in a super risk-averse way with, I mean, if we talked before we came on air, where Arsenal in the open play XG table, and they're basically bang in the middle. They're 9th in the open play XG table. By playing in this way, it's reducing their ability to score from open play, but that doesn't matter because they can make up the difference with set pieces. Now, that's a purely aesthetic argument, right? That what I'm saying is the game itself is based around open play, trying to break teams down. There's nothing saying in the rules saying that you shouldn't do that. But I think that the point that I've kind of made is that if the people who essentially the purveyors of the game, the people who choose the laws of the game, have often changed the laws of the game to make it a more entertaining spectacle. And so there is an argument to be made that, you know, the Premier League could try and make it harder for teams to score from open play, from set pieces, because then that would encourage teams to then score from open play. The problem with that is that doesn't necessarily guarantee that the football is going to be more exciting. And also it raises a question about the ethics of like, how do you like make rules about the game? Like, to what extent, if the Premier League came out and made it much harder for Arsenal to score set pieces, Arsenal fans would be like, that's just like the FA or the Premier League or whatever.
How would they do that?
Well, I mean, there's plenty of things you could do, right? One of the things that people talk about is having a shot clock on set pieces, because part of the issue is that it's like slowing the game down, right? So after 9 games, Brentford had spent 70 minutes of their games taking long throws. Wow. Like literally, that's how much of so almost a whole game in 9 was spent just like prepping to throw the ball long. So there's talk about maybe in having that 8-second shot clock or whatever. I guess you maybe have to change for throw-ins and corners, and that would it would mean it was harder for you to actually create like structured attacking set pieces because you'd be rushing a bit more, but also it would speed the game up.
So I see. So it goes out of play, so you have to get back in a certain amount of time.
Yeah, right.
All right. You get some fun little things happening there.
Yeah. Another suggestion I've heard is, I mean, one of them is that they could just be much more strict on contact in the box, which isn't being very strictly refereed at the moment.
Maybe when the ball goes out of play, someone else kicks it in, like when you're playing a coaching session. Do you know? So the ball goes out.
There's loads of gimmicks you have. One of them is like whoever who's the last player to touch the ball before it goes out on the team that's taking the corner has to take the corner. Or I've seen some arguments that you could make like the 6-yard box, no one can go in until the ball's kicked and stuff like that to avoid like goalkeepers being put under pressure.
But even having to come up with things like this, it makes it sound like it might be like the sport sort of being that they've worked out the best way to win it. Now, there are no Arsenal fans here, obviously, but I'll ask you, Kaya, how do you feel about this as someone who's watched their team score lots of set pieces? Do you think John's on to something? Do you think he's...
I see where John is coming from, actually. And I probably get a lot of stick from Arsenal fans for this, but I get why people don't enjoy this Arsenal team, because a lot of the time they're not the most exciting to watch. And it's not that, if you're a neutral, and you said it's a purely aesthetic argument, and from that perspective, I agree. It's not that necessarily fun to watch, to wait 30 seconds for a team to prepare a play. It's a bit like, it strikes me a bit sort of NFL-y sometimes, in the way that it's all like so pre-prepared in the plays.
I totally agree,
Yeah, it's just like, and I don't like the idea that is where the game is heading. And it's interesting, Nicolas Jovet, the Arsenal set-piece coach, did actually like study in North America, and that's sort of where I think a lot of his influences and ideas, a lot of his original ideas came from that North American sports style, and I wouldn't be surprised if there are some NFL influences in that. And I think it's effective, and that's why people are upset about it. So from that perspective, I kind of get why Arsenal fans are angry, and I get why John is getting lots of people in his comments, but I don't think you're saying anything wrong. I just think I understand why Arsenal fans are upset, because they're thinking, well, why are people only paying attention to this now that there's a team who are really good at it? But then I think there's a slight underestimation of how important the delivery of Declan Rice is, and how important the delivery of Bukayo Saka is, and how important the athleticism of Gabriel is. Like, these are really important skills and like things that not every single player can do and not every single team can do. So I think there is a kind of a stick that is used to be at Arsenal that they only score from set pieces, but that's because of the excellent skill of two of their best players.
Yeah, and they also have complete control of the pitch, right? So
exactly.
Part of it's almost like tactical, like you're saying, John. Like, they have control of it, so they don't concede counters. How do they generate chances? If they're too risky, that's going to result in things against them. So if they just have complete control, they get a corner and then they can go from there. I would say that Man City don't really focus on this in the same way, but yet they, in the past, have had control anyway. So I don't know if you have a contrasting opinion on this as someone who, like, Man City were very good with the ball, I thought, in the game against Bournemouth, who scored against them with a corner, right? How do you see it?
I mean, City have actually been quite kind of, before Bournemouth, I don't think they conceded a set piece or scored a set piece this season. They've been quite,
they're bottom of the set piece table. In terms of attacking set pieces. This season.
Just kind of letting their kind of open play stuff do the talking. I mean, not strictly related to your question, but I kind of wonder when teams start to get as creative defending set pieces as they are attacking set pieces, right? Or whether there's a way to do that, whether it is just a case of, look, like, they're putting 10 players in the box, we have to defend the box, we've got no way of countering this. I mean, we have seen it's kind of come in and out of a game, but there was an example in the Chelsea game where they left 3 players up front, essentially, for a Tottenham. I think it was
Chelsea pushing 3 players up at long throws.
And whether that's something of like, right, you can do your set piece routine, but we're going to disrupt it by saying, well, doing something else in counter of that. It kind of feels like whether it's, teams are just kind of accepting that they're going to get hit by a set piece at the moment.
That is interesting, though, because if you zoom out even further, like, this is what it is just now. And if Arsenal are maximising it and getting like more than, if we accept that the general average of like goals from set pieces is like 30% or something like that, I think it was. 27%, right? There we go. So that's the numbers I was after.
This season,
I knew you'd deliver. So
you could have just made that up.
But that's like the average kind of return of set piece goals, So that's what that is now. But if Arsenal are so good at them and they're getting it, what was it? You said 60-something%.
I think when they scored the set piece at the weekend, I think it was 66% at that point. But then they scored another.
So it will average down, right? So it won't be quite as high as that. But if you see that and you're looking at it purely from a numbers point of view, like if you're analysing it like an economist would, then you would look at that and go, well, we need to be better at that, which might inform other teams' recruitment, which would then inform how the teams play, because oftentimes players who are massive and good at set pieces aren't going to be the best at playing like Man City.
I think it's also worth saying that we've talked a lot in this podcast episode about how we're at a bit of a crossroads when it comes to like tactical ideas. And we've talked about the dominant tactical meta collapsing. And as a result of that, I think we're in a world where like tactical diversity is like key. Teams can't just play in one way. We've said already that City are now finding lots of different ways of playing. And I think when you do that, the temptation is always, you can either be like, oh, let's just experiment and try and find ways of being dominant again. Or you can look at something like set pieces and be like, actually, that's one of the few areas of the old style which is still consistently good. And it's one of the areas where you can actually plan for it, etc. You can lean into that. And so it doesn't surprise me at all that a lot of teams are just like, in a world that's actually quite confusing from a tactical point of view, why not just lean into set pieces right now, especially when there isn't really any sort of dominant teams in terms of open play stuff. You're all well and good actually leaning into that a little bit. The worry that I have is that, like, as you're saying there, what if teams now start just building their squads around set pieces?
Yeah.
Because that does have a knock-on impact into your ability to generate from open play. And so if all squads just suddenly start moving towards like the gigantification of players, and the game just then becomes about trying to generate set pieces and dominate from them, in my opinion, that makes the game worse. The example that I used before we started the podcast was the example of Quidditch, which anyone who knows anything about sports knows is a very shit sport, because in Quidditch you have like an invasion sport where you're trying to get a ball through some hoops on broomsticks. and you score a point every time the ball goes through. But
there's various like different scores you can get.
Is there?
So like
I don't know the game very well.
So I mean, I've read the books now. I was much younger, but as I recall, what you fly around in a broom, right? And then there's all these different hoops, and you throw different kind of balls through or whatever. But then I'm paraphrasing someone else's tweet. But then it turns out after an hour and a half of pure high octane action, someone in the car park outside has caught the magic frog, and therefore they're like, "Don't worry, guys, none of this mattered because catching the snitch, it's called the golden snitch. It's just this thing that flies about, you know.
Uh-huh.
And if you're good enough to catch that, that's like
and the other
1,000 points.
The other game is never going to be scored highly enough for that to make a difference. It's basically whoever catches this thing wins.
But this is man mark all the people who can find the snitch.
Do you think that's what would happen? Like,
Probably.
Just put 2 on Potter, it would have been easy. No problem.
double up on
Double team
Potter,
Potter
That's what
but this should be the conversation that then would be had, wouldn't it? It would be like, are we ruining the game of Quidditch?
So if we man mark Potter and he can't get to the snitch, then that means that you just have to focus constantly on these boring one pointers, which is like when you're playing Pokemon trying to farm to get a Pikachu, where you just keep farming. And that's really dull.
I just like to put, I don't think it will go that far where teams do start, because it is only a small part of the game, and so much of the rest of the game does matter. And like you spoke about, teams need to be diverse and adapt to lots of different things. And like the reason people are praising this Arsenal team so much, and I think Scott Parker said it in his pre and post match press conferences, I think, about Arsenal not being entirely reliant on set pieces, and maybe you beg to differ on that, but they are a tactically diverse team who can do lots of different things, and they've been built to do lots of different things. And I think that is an extreme which I don't think we'll get to, because there are so many other parts of the game which are so important. There will always be a place for players who are really good at lock picking when it comes to low blocks and those kind of things. I don't think a Martin Odegaard will be sacrificed in place of, I don't know, a Gabriel in midfield just because Gabriel is a couple inches taller and better in the air. I don't see that ever happening.
Yeah, I guess I would push back by saying the issue becomes that you are able to play in this risk-averse way because you know you're going to make the difference up with set pieces. And I think that if set pieces became less efficient for you, then you would have to become more, what's the opposite? Less risk-averse? Less risk-averse. You would have to do... A lot of Arsenal fans say to me, well, you know...
Risky.
Teams sit deep against us, they sit in low blocks. And I feel as though I'm in danger of just becoming like Roy Keane-ish on this and being like, that's the game. And I think that this is where it comes down to the aesthetic argument, because for me, the game is you have two teams playing against each other. It's an invasion sport. You're trying to get close to their goal and score chances. If the opponent decides to sit deep and make it hard for you to do, that's part of the game. That's as much part of the game as anything. And so I guess for me, it almost everything just sort of feels as though this ability to score from set pieces just incentivizes Arsenal to not try and score goals as much as to be safe and not give up goals, which is fine. Like you're talking to the guy who's like the out of possession guy here. So I understand, like, there's a lot of people who think that the out of possession evolution has ruined the game as well. And I understand that. And but at the same time, despite caring about the out of possession side of the game, for me, the out of possession side of the game is only ever important as the opposite side to the in possession side of the game. And it's all about getting the balance right. You need to defend well enough to be able to score goals. And I think that maybe with the set piece stuff, it's just heading too far in the direction of not allowing goals from open play in a way that becomes problematic. But I understand that there's an irony in this, that, you know, I'm essentially talking about trying to introduce rules to reduce the amount of goals that are scored from set pieces. So yeah, I guess that sort of flips my argument on the head, and I can't really see the Premier League ever wanting to necessarily stop that.
I think they are. I remember reading a story that they are potentially considering the shot clock thing that you were talking about.
Long throws. Yeah.
But yeah, I agree. And I don't think those laws would necessarily be introduced on set pieces. I think, yeah, it's an issue that will probably be going on for the rest of the season. I'm sure we'll have this conversation again in 10 games.
I do want to clarify as well that the game that prompted this for me was the Spurs game against Everton, not any Arsenal game. And like, Arsenal have been doing this for years now, and I've celebrated it. And you know, the fact that Chelsea are now using this, I think, is actually impressive given the players that they have. I think it's always impressive when you optimize within the rules of the game. But I do think there's also always the question of, like, when the rules of the game almost get broken a little bit, what do we do then? Like, is there a situation where we say, actually, we never considered that this might become a problem? It has now, so now we can change the rules. At the moment, that would look like it was punishing Arsenal unfairly. So I understand why Arsenal fans don't like it. But I think in the long run, if we did start seeing things going in that direction, I think there would be conversations about changing the rules.
Steve has written in highlighter pen, as you can probably see. What does an invasion sport mean, John?
Yeah, I guess an invasion sport is just when you're trying to get an object usually into an opponent's territory, right? So in football, you're defending your own goal and the opponent are trying to break
Rugby
it down.
would be another example.
Yeah, I mean basically any sport that involves teams really is an invasion sport.
Tennis
I
would
guess.
not be, or would it?
Yeah, I guess if you consider doubles tennis to be a team sport, then yeah, that would
Croquet?
Yeah, croquet is an invasion sport because it was played by the something got cut.
That works. Liverpool beat Aston Villa 2-0. And the thing that's interesting about this for me is that Arne Slot has spent about 6 to 7 weeks telling everyone specifically how to beat his team. He said it in multiple press conferences and interviews. On the TV, we've all seen him do it. But Unai Emery had a clever plan.
He doesn't have a TV, clearly, Unai Emery, because he did the opposite of what Slot has been telling everyone else to do. Because Liverpool have had a problem when teams go direct against them, and there's plenty of evidence out there that the long balls that Liverpool have faced have been massive compared to. Actually, interestingly, Bournemouth. A lot of teams go long against Bournemouth, but any team who's good at pressing up is you're incentivized to play over the press. And then the question is, well, how do you sort of, when the ball breaks down, like, how do you deal with that? And Liverpool clearly haven't been great at being able to come out of those situations. However, Unai Emery decided, well, what we need to do is actually build up even more and invite the high press.
Is it the double bluff? Is it Arne Slot won't expect this?
I don't know.
How does that work?
I guess so I was thinking about this. Why would Villa not do that? And I suppose like Villa don't really have the best personnel to like play long into a striker, and they do play long because they have these sort of, they build up in these little triangles. Everyone knows all of this, right? They build up in these little triangles on either side of the pitch, quite deep. And if they're getting pressed too much on one side, they'll maybe move it across to the other side, where they have another triangle over there of the centre back, the full back, and the pivot player on that side. And they often have these escapes where they can play into the half spaces where one of the forwards will be dropping off. And if you can stop them from like building up by pressing aggressively, and you can track the players in the half spaces, then all they've got is kind of going long. And that was what happened in this game. They tried to build up in these deep triangles. Liverpool pressed quite well. They had Szoboszlai like in the front line, so that's always going to make you very overpowered in terms of the press. And I mean, the first goal comes from Martinez just playing the ball straight to Salah, who plays the ball in. And that was it. They sort of played in a way that suits Liverpool, and Liverpool won the game. And the story of the season so far has been teams not playing in a way that suits Liverpool, and Liverpool not winning the game. So it does kind of raise questions about why Emery thought that this would be any different.
I think between you both, you've seen the entire game, but not
Yes.
the entire one individually.
I think we should lean on these two.
Yeah.
So I want to see what they thought of each other. Who saw the first half?
I saw the first half.
You saw the first half and you saw the second.
Ish, yeah.
So,
None of that.
This is going to be top tier. I like this. So what do you make of Liverpool in the first half?
Good.
What do you make of Liverpool in the second half?
All right.
Yeah.
That's what we want. Yes. Do you think Liverpool will? Do you think they turned a corner now? Do you like? What does this mean without having seen the entire game?
Oh, wow. Well, I did see Aston Villa and City the week before, and I thought they were very organised. It was quite frustrating from a City perspective because I think man for man they were very good. I think Onana and Kamara are really nice, kind of strong midfield. They're very good. Kind of when the ball breaks in midfield, they're very good at hoovering up.
I've heard Villa fans talking especially about Kamara being excellent this year.
Yeah, really good. And then I just thought they did look a little bit, as John just said, a bit too risky. Not great when they were kind of building up, and Liverpool pounced on that. And that's all I've got to say.
I think that's fine. I think that works. I believe that.
Yeah. I might have slightly overdone it with good in my one word assumption.
It's okay. You don't have to watch every single game.
I think it's fine to say they were good.
They were
in after the back of a 4-loss.
True. Relative to previous,
you absolutely take that.
True. I thought Villa had actually some decent chances in the first half. They did create some decent chances, and I know the approach wasn't the way to beat Liverpool, but they could have beaten Liverpool that way, and it shows that Liverpool are still quite vulnerable, despite and it might be a confidence thing. It might just be, but defensively they look It's interesting that Slot went back to, I think it was 9 of the 11 were from the title-winning team last season. Yeah. So it's interesting that maybe it's a sort of admission from him in stealth that sort of this season's tactics and the summer of additions haven't quite worked yet, and maybe he wants to head back in that direction.
Do you know, like, it's probably predictable of me to say it, but I think just having Andy Robertson in there, just having like the captain, the sort of the character there, rather than like Kirk is a great player, right? But you put Robertson in, you're just you have a bit more experience is the wrong word to use. But there's something about it that you have the core group there. But I think what you're talking about Szoboszlai is kind of key as well, because it has been Wirtz for a lot of the season playing in the front part, but then you lose him from the press. And I know that Slot hasn't played Wirtz every single time, and he's dropped him, and Szoboszlai has been there. But that was a big part of what worked last season, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I do think it's interesting what you're saying, that because basically this was last season's team with Ekitike up front, right? Yeah. Which is obviously just going to make you better. Yeah. And so it was the case. We've talked at length about like the Wirtz impact, but even just having Robertson in that back line, I know that Bradley played on the other side, so it's not quite the same as the starting 11 you'd have got last season. But we've talked a lot about the way that Liverpool generated chances last season, and you know, I guess again, like to bring it back to the Arsenal thing, is that there are more teams like playing low blocks now against them, because they knew that if they pressed up against them, they were just going to get killed in transition. So. Yeah, I think the problems that Liverpool have had is that they've not really had the best tactical environment to play someone like Florian Wirtz in. And, you know, teams will use that as a stick to beat Wirtz with, because they'll say, you know, Bundesliga tax, 100 and whatever million pounds, euros. This guy should be an immediate starter coming in and scoring and assisting goals. But they really haven't profiled him in a particularly great way. And I guess the big question going forward is Slot going to find a solution to that, or is he going to do what he did in this game and just sort of fall back on last season a little bit more? And yeah, I don't know. Do we think that this is just, to me, this just feels like an outlier game, because I don't think anyone else is going to watch that game now and think, yeah, we should try and build up against Liverpool.
Well, we know that none of it matters because someone outside in the car park caught the magic frog.
That's right. So set pieces.
That's what
I think they should just give up with open play altogether.
Catch the magic frog, win the game. And we've now caught the magic frog of our studio, because that is the end of our podcast today. So now...
but that means none of the podcast counts. It's just that we caught the frog. Right?
Exactly.
So ignore everything.
So in the intro, what we'll do is say skip to the very end where you'll find out the purpose of the podcast. Okay, well, we'll say thank you. Thank you, Kaya.
Thank you.
Well, yes. Thank you, John.
Thank you.
He's been back. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you very much.
Thanks
for doing all the talking in the second half.
And thank you to Steve for putting everything together. And of course, thank you to the audience. John is back on Thursday John is back on Thursday with Tom and the rest of the Data Boys. And next Monday, Joe Devine returns, so you can be happy. I don't know if I'm here, no idea. Bye.